We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Wednesday, March 4th, 2026, and today is going to be all about some unhealthy diversions. We're getting distracted because I open up my news feeds trying to prepare for the show, and I can't find anything that is on a topic that plays in Peoria. It's all about bombs going on in the Middle East, and we have been distracted entirely from what I contend is the most important story going on, and that is that the mass deportations aren't happening. So today we're going to be talking about how the president might have been deluded into going to war, and it is a distraction from what she should be focusing on. Also, some mass deportations are becoming incredibly hard due to some decisions made by the administration. Also, some rulings from the court. Also, some local jurisdictions are pushing back. Illegal aliens are violently murdering Americans, and yet some of them are still allowed to work in law enforcement. So let's get after it. And as I like to do, I like to kind of come at things from a different sort of angle. So let's begin today with a little bit of a history lesson, a crazy history lesson about a prior president, Teddy Roosevelt. Now, stick with me. We're going to go into some fun history, some wild stuff. I guarantee, unless you were some sort of crazy TR buff, you've never heard this before. Now let's go all the way back over 100 years. Teddy Roosevelt was the president. He winds up leaving office, and then he gets the itch. He gets encouraged. I'm going to run again. So he ran as a progressive against the sitting president, Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. Winds up splitting the vote. Woodrow Wilson gets elected, and then the country kind of goes down the tank because he was a pretty awful president. But Teddy Roosevelt, the guy's face was on Mount Rushmore, pretty beloved figure in American history, American lore. And I got my problems with some of the stuff he did. Some of the things he did were awesome. The man in the arena speech that every single cop lists off at their retirement party, you can't get any better. Chef's kiss. And then at the same time, the guy was kind of a warmonger, a globalist-ish, wanted to get us into the Spanish-American War, but got to tip your cap. He commanded troops in battle. He didn't sit behind a desk. He was definitely not a chicken hawk. He actually got troops ready to go to World War I when Americans weren't really interested in going. And again, I got my ideological problems with that, but you can't dispute the man's courage. So unlike Kamala Harris, who lost the presidential election and then just wound up drowning her sorrows in a box of Franzia wine, Teddy Roosevelt went a different route. He loses and he says, I got to get my mojo back. What am I going to do? I'm going to take my son and we're going to go down to Brazil and we're going to ride on a river that's completely uncharted and we're going to chart it. Mind you, this is happening in the era where there's photographs. I mean, not like times where we have to tell legends. There was actual modern news at this point. Telegraphs were available. He goes down there and over the course of a weekend? Nah. 10 days? No. 2 months. 2 months in the Brazilian jungle with a crew of 22 guys at the start charts this river of doubt. It became later the Roosevelt River because of what went on down there. And it wasn't a pleasant experience. A former president did this. Track with me on this. If Bill Clinton, when he's not staring at old pictures of the Epstein and laughing and reminiscing, or George W. Bush, or Joe Biden, I mean, I guess he's not really ambulatory. Donald Trump, let's say, leaves office with the full knowledge of the American people, says, I'm going on a whitewater rafting trip for a couple of months. I'll let you know how it goes. During this trip, one person drowned. Another one murdered somebody within the crew and then just fled off into the jungle. They dealt with horrible disease. They had dysentery. Roosevelt actually got malaria. He actually jumped in the river at one point and cut his leg so badly they had to do emergency surgery and he got infections that he lived with for the rest of his life. 2 months it took them. And then at the end, he lost like 55 pounds, comes back, goes to speaking tour again, actually starts to feel the itch to get back into politics, didn't wind up doing it, but returned to a person of prominence having regained his mojo. I mean, it's a distraction. I could argue that it probably wasn't the most healthy decision, but a crazy American history story nonetheless. Now, why am I talking about that? Let's go over to our current president, who I believe has an unhealthy diversion from what is the most important thing pressing for the American people right now. What plays in Peoria is the phrase. Well, it's domestic issues. Every single election, exit polls come out. What was the most important part of the election? The economy, jobs, inflation. And close to that in 2024, the most recent nationwide election, was illegal immigration. Inflation, immigration, 1 and 1A, if you will. And I'm not hearing anything about that now. In fact, when I look up the news feeds and the various sources I like to go to prepare for the American Radicals podcast, I don't see a single headline about it. I actually had to dig pretty deep into archives to get the information that I'm going to bring to you today about it, because it's all about bombs dropping in the Middle East, because the president thinks that foreign policy is probably his path to getting his mojo back. The polls are down, his base is depressed. How do we get it back? Well, we'll just drop some Moabs and everybody will rally around the president, rally around the flag, and turn out for the midterms. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the American people respond more to the promises you made, to things that directly impact their lives. Most Americans can't find Iran on a map. But for those who are struggling with jobs or housing, they could easily point to all the illegal aliens that the Joe Biden Autopen administration allowed to flood across our border in complete contravention to our pesky, dusty document, our social compact, our constitution, that says that the federal government is supposed to ensure border sovereignty and eject anybody who floods across the border. We wanted that. We voted for that in mass. A mandate was sent, and we haven't seen it. Instead, president's getting kind of drawn into what's going on overseas. And again, out of my depth on foreign policy, I realize you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. You can't solely be focused on one issue or one particular umbrella, one lane, domestic only, nothing foreign. It is a different time in history. We have the internet, we have modern communications. We have to interface with other countries around the world, but I can't help but thinking your bread is buttered on the domestic front with the issue of the day that nobody is talking about, and that is illegal immigration. So, to kick us off on our stories for the day, let's go over to the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, and we had a revelation about what could be driving the president to focus on Iran so much. Headline: How Trump assassination attempts played into his decision to attack Iran. Now, here's the quotation that Donald Trump gave to ABC News. Quote, "I got him before he got me," Trump said in an interview. "I got him first." And he's talking about the Ayatollah. The Iranian desire to kill Trump dates back to when he ordered the airstrike on Soleimani, and that was back in the last year of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. That was in January 2020. That's when he rolled out there and he said Soleimani, he died like a dog, and the canine that went in there after him, like they got some sort of medal of valor, and there was a lot of celebration, except from the communist media, which said that Soleimani was some sort of like cleric and great religious leader, similar to the way that they were decrying the death of the Ayatollah. But what was the assassination threat out of this? Now, there were two. Donald Trump said they tried to get me twice. I don't think he's alluding to the assassin who was down at Mar-a-Lago, who waiting for him at the golf course. And certainly there's been no evidentiary connection established with Thomas Matthew Crooks and Butler, even though they tried, which is really what I want to get to. The president's getting some bad information, because the two examples that are pointed to in the story from the Washington Post, one of them is a thief merchant. We've talked about him over and over again. This is the guy who was Pakistani, who came through Iran to Texas because the FBI Dallas field office endorsed his arrival, not to just arrest him on sight, but because they had him on the hook. They realized that he was a vulnerable person, a retard, more or less, that they could use to juke their counterterrorism stats. So they allowed him to arrive and then travel all the way to New York City, where he met with confidential human sources and planned his plot. And his plot was to do some fake protests outside of random politicians' houses, steal classified material that he assumed they had laying around their houses, and then also hire a bunch of hitmen who he would find by going around the nightlife in Manhattan and finding them at nightclubs. And then he would get them to assassinate some various US politicians. And the presumption was Donald Trump was probably one of them. And Asif Merchant was going to achieve all of this for $5,000, which he didn't have. He was going to have to ask his cousin to lend him the money because Asif Merchant is a retard, a vulnerable person who got playbooked by the FBI. And his arrest happened to be the day before the Butler assassination plot. So the FBI, in the effort to kind of blur that entire thing, that they might have actually had crooks on the hook as an entrapment plot, they said, well, no, I ran Asif Merchant. That's the first one. The second one that the Washington Post mentions, and they actually got an attachment from the Department of Justice. And this is a press release that's talking about this other individual who was arrested. Headline: Justice Department announces murder for hire and related charges against IRGC asset and 2 local operatives. So it is a extremely long, if you see here, if you happen to be watching on rumble.com/amradpod or YouTube at amradpod, or if you watch later over on Spotify, which everybody should definitely do. And I'm aware that there's an issue with Spotify, guys, because apparently there's 2 separate amradpod channels. I'm trying to work with Spotify in order to get that rectified. But if you wouldn't mind, just help us out. Go over there and subscribe to both AmRed Pod channels. It's free, won't cost you anything. And on top of that, wherever the most and latest podcast gets dropped, you'll get access to it. So you'll see that that's a pretty long press release if you happen to be watching us. What were the details? I'm not going to go into a huge amount of them, but bad guy here, his name is Shakari. He informed law enforcement when they interdicted him that he was tasked on October 7th, 2024, because of the goings on in Israel, with providing a plan to kill President-elect Donald J. Trump, who wasn't the president-elect at that point. But anyway, that was it. He was tasked with providing a plan to do that. And that was on top of trying to actually assassinate or plan to assassinate a U.S. citizen of Iranian descent who was speaking out against the Ayatollah, and also try to assassinate 2 Jewish American citizens. So this guy had some pretty big ambitions. Seems to me that he's probably of similar intellect level as Asif Merchant and was likely playbooked. But that, nonetheless, is the motivating factor, or at least one of the big motivating factors behind our president right now going to war with Iran. They tried to get me twice. I'm going to get him before he gets me. And I mean, I don't hate that sentiment. If somebody tried to murder me or one of my close loved ones, I'm going to burn everything to the ground to get you. And this instance, the individual just happens to be the commander-in-chief of the greatest military that has ever dawned the earth. So I get that. But is this a healthy distraction? Or is it getting us away from what we should be focusing on? What electorally will play in Peoria, and what will actually improve the lives of Americans and actually save some lives of Americans? I would contend no. We're completely unfocused on what we have to be, and that is mass deportations. So the rest of the pieces I want to talk about today relate to illegal immigration. First one, and actually I have a photograph of it. This is a dude who was just arrested. Isn't this the face of evil? Let's find out how evil. This was posted on ICE's social media. Ibrahim George Callan, a legal alien from Sierra Leone, whose visitor visa expired in 2024 during the Otto Penn administration. He was arrested while training to be a Delaware County prison corrections officer. He was training to be a jailer. He had already been selected and hired. And he was charged by the Glenolden police for, quote, rape, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, sexual assault, aggravated indecent assault, false imprisonment, indecent assault, and he has now been sent back into the community because the prosecutor's office out of Philadelphia was not interested in cooperating with ICE. So ICE then, on its own initiative, had to go and secure a deportation so they could do the ERO, the enforcement removal operation, in order to get handcuffs on this guy because of the resistance from the locality, Delaware County, Philadelphia area. They don't want to play nice with ICE. So they allowed a rapist onto the street and forced ICE to actually work harder than they should have. The guy was in handcuffs. Actually, before he was in handcuffs, he was in the jail because he was training to be a jailer. That's the message that's sent by that locality. We want rapists to work in the jails. We want illegal alien rapists. That's what we're here for. This is what we should be focusing on. There should be some punitive action also taken against Delaware County, but we're kind of distracted. We have an unhealthy diversion potentially going on overseas. Similarly, as long as we're talking about illegal aliens becoming members of law enforcement and potentially members of our military, here's another one. It comes from Department of Homeland Security. Headline: serial immigration fraudster working as a Minnesota corrections officer. He had actually made it through training. He was arrested. His name is Morris Brown. He was from Liberia. He came to the US in 2014 as a non-immigrant student visa holder, and that was terminated because he didn't actually go to school. Then he joined the Army National Guard in Pennsylvania, but then went AWOL. So a couple of years go by because we are existing in a time where illegal aliens can just flee into the interior of the country. He applies for some sort of asylum, a green card. He wanted to use what was called the Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness Program in 2020. Under the first Trump administration, I guess they weren't really focusing on what was going on. Maybe they had other concerns. Maybe they had an unhealthy diversion with, I don't know, a novel chest cold out of Wuhan. See what goes on when everybody gets distracted. That's where the evil happens. That's the banality of evil. It's in the details. So this dirtbag applies for a green card through this Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness Program, but he was denied because he misrepresented his prior military service where he went AWOL. He was ultimately arrested and discharged from the military under a, quote, other than honorable condition in 2022 during the Biden administration. Other than honorable? They didn't dishonorably discharge this guy. He's not even an American. And he's lied. The American military, under the commander-in-chief leadership of the auto pen, Joe Biden, didn't give him a dishonorable discharge. And he remained in America. 2024, applied to naturalize as a U.S. citizen based on his prior military service because it was an other than honorable discharge. That winds up getting denied. But at the same time, because he resides in Minnesota, which is ceded territory at this point, on par with California, Illinois, New York, he gets hired as a corrections officer. That's a jailer for the state of Minnesota. And he had no legal immigration status, and he was claiming to be a U.S. citizen. So now he's been apprehended. Let's see if he gets evicted. That's another example. I've got a third one here, and I've got an accompanying video. So let's kick it off with this. This is a local news report about an individual from Sierra Leone who has just murdered an American citizen.
A Virginia woman was killed at a Fairfax County bus stop. We're learning the man charged in her murder is in the U.S. illegally. His name is Abdul Jallo from Sierra Leone, according to the Department of Homeland Security. I'm at the Fairfax County Courthouse where I discovered this man has a lengthy criminal history. More than 40 charges in the past, ranging from stabbings to malicious wounding and much more. And almost every case, Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney Steve Toscano dropped charges against this man. only secured one conviction in the past. He served very little time. He was let back out into the community, where then he allegedly stabbed this woman of Fredericksburg. Now, this woman's family is heartbroken. According to an obituary, her family describes this woman, Stephanie Mentor, as a jolly, happy individual, a light in dark places. And tonight, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is calling on Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger and Fairfax County officials to hand this man over to ICE so they can deport him.
Wow, what's the status? Was he handed over? Well, actually, before we get to that, they kind of brushed over it. I think that was a pretty good job by the local news correspondent. You could kind of tell that he had outrage. So I don't think he's necessarily a communist. But what were the charges? This guy, he said, has been charged with over 40 crimes. He'd been arrested 30 times. 30 times. That's a frequent flyer for Fairfax County. Various charges: rape, malicious wounding, assault, drug possession, identity theft, trespassing, larceny, firing a weapon, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and pickpocketing. ICE previously had put a detainer on him in 2020 during oh yeah, that's right, the Trump administration, part one. It was also when Virginia was under the leadership of another communist Democrat, so they weren't playing very nice with DHS. But it was not honored. In fact, this guy was let free. He wasn't protected. So now we're waiting to see if Fairfax County will play nice, that they have allowed this guy to roam the streets for another 5 to 6 years and murder one of their citizens. I guess it's a question of who your priorities are. And if you are judging of anything from the State of the Union that was a week ago, the communist Democrats in the country, they refused to stand when they were asked directly by our president if their top priority were American citizens. If it's illegal aliens, well, they're probably going to try to remove this guy from ICE, or at least inhibit ICE's ability to remove him from our country, which is their prime directive. That is their job. That's in keeping with laws that were passed by our elected officials in the legislature, signed by our elected officials in the executive branch, and in keeping with our pesky, dusty documents that require them to do that. But there's been quite a bit of resistance. And as a result of that, and as a result of us not being a little bit more assertive and maybe getting distracted with other things, there's a family right now that's missing a wife, missing a mom, missing a daughter. She was stabbed in the neck by this piece of trash. Now, should he be deported? Yes, or thrown into a wood chipper. I'm kind of okay with the latter. I've actually preferred the latter. So let's go now to, this one. This is a story from the Washington Post. Because as a downstream consequence also of this illegal alien, our last story in Fairfax County, there was a statement that came out from Homeland Security. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So before I connect us to the Washington Post, let's go to this story to close us out on this murderer out of Virginia. So apparently, the DHS lodged a final order of removal, and they said that they wanted to find him a home to take him because Sierra Leone was refusing to take him. So this is the whole third country order, which takes us to the next piece from the Washington Post. Headline: Trump administration's third country deportation policy unlawful, judge finds. So as the policy goes right now, if you're unaware, if ICE gets you apprehended and they're in the process of deporting you, and your home country refuses to accept you, the policy has been, all right, we're going to find another country that's willing to accept you. And that's where the whole like El Salvador max security prison came out, because they said, hey, if you'll pay us to take them, we'll take them. Now, I just want them gone. I don't care if we drop them in the ocean. I think for the individual from Virginia, we should probably just drop them into some shark-infested water. That would be just fine with me. I don't understand the home country refusing to take their citizen back. I mean, they can refuse and be like, yeah, he's a piece of trash. We don't want him. And the United States, which is currently dropping bombs all over the world, is apparently not tough enough to say, we don't care, and then just rolling them out of the helicopter and saying, take your boy. I mean, drop them within the ocean limits of the country. close enough to the coastline that it counts. I don't care. So I don't really understand how we're trying to flex and pose and show just how strong we are on the global front by getting involved with a war in Iran. And at the same time, we can't tell some piece of trash Latin American country, you're taking your boy, we don't care, or there will be consequences. But now a communist judge has taken this policy under consideration and says that our government can't use third countries. Well, that's a problem for the policy. I think that it could be overcome pretty easily with an appeal. It could be overcome a little bit more easily if we actually flexed and said to the original country, you're getting your boy. But to the piece nonetheless, because of resistance, because of the courts are run by a bunch of communist judges, they are hashtag resisting the prime directive of ICE, the mandate that was sent for us to do mass deportations of some of the worst people in country illegally. So U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy's final decision, it invalidates a policy memo from last spring from ICE that allowed officers to deport migrants, you mean illegal aliens, to countries that are not of their own with as little as 6 hours notice. 6 hours, that seems pretty generous. I think they should just be dropped off, I don't know, just at the Rio Grande if we're going to actually pay for it. And then we position a nice 18-year-old atop a Humvee with a 50 cal telling them to keep walking. But this judge, Judge Brian Murphy, said that the administration must give migrants, illegal aliens, meaningful notice before removal to any third country. But he didn't kind of define what meaningful notice means, so that needs to be adjudicated. And this communist also, Washington Post notes that he certified a lawsuit challenging the third country removal policy entirely last spring. So administration officials said that they have no choice but to partner with foreign countries that are willing to accept the undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, whose native nations do not agree to take them back. If we were not distracted, if we were interested in flexing and showing our strength on a domestic issue that also has a foreign policy nexus, I think the better thing to do, rather than fight it out in the courts with a communist judge where you know you will lose, are to just flex on the home countries. You're taking your boy back. And on top of that, if you want to flex in the courts on the home front, I don't really have a problem with that either. You and what army, Judge? Are you going to direct the United States Marshal Service to come and arrest me because I'm in contempt of your order? I think I'll just tell the U.S. Marshal to back off, and he will. That's how that works. Because that's suboptimal, but that's at least a recognition of the way that our social compact currently stands, and that is in a shattered condition. Now, how proficient are we at flexing? What sort of tools do we have in the tool belt, and are we using them in the best possible way? Or do we look kind of like, I don't know, like a band of retards? Well, it's not good. Headline, NBC News. U.S. military used a laser to shoot down Customs and Border Protection drone, sparking a new air closure. Now, the Customs and Border Protection flew a drone into military airspace near Fort Hancock, Texas, without notifying, and then the military took the drone down with a high-energy laser. It comes 2 weeks after the Customs and Borders Protection used a military laser themselves that they had access to shoot down what turned out to be party balloons in Texas, and that's why we had the temporary closure over the El Paso airspace. The only thing I want to get out of this is we are not talking to each other. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. That's a problem. You have to communicate. You have to liaise, particularly if you're operating in each other's respective areas of responsibility. You don't want there to be an unnecessary risk to the public. You don't want there to be any collateral damage. Particularly, I don't think the drones are cheap. But on top of that, we have lasers and we don't use them for illegal aliens. I'm now amending my policy. 50 cals? No. I want 18-year-olds on top of Humvees after we have Trail of Tears march 50 million illegal aliens down to the Rio Grande. I want them with lasers. That seems like the best course of action if we weren't too damn distracted with other things going on in places that most people can't find on a map. But you know who's not distracted? The localities that keep pushing back. Now, we have the prosecutors' offices who are not cooperating with ICE. We have these judges who are standing up all these roadblocks that they can. How about a county prosecutor that is now going to go after ICE and some of the leadership? This is a story from CNN. Minnesota County Attorney investigating Greg Bovino and other federal officials over immigration crackdown. And this relates to what went on in Hennepin County. That is Minneapolis. So Hennepin County's attorney office is investigating 17 incidents that were brought to their attention by the community. So the local communists, they used a portal, an online portal that was created by the county prosecutor at taxpayer expense for citizens who were unhappy with the federal government doing one of the few things that the American people require it do. They reported it to the local prosecutor. And they're saying, hey, we're going to investigate. You might have violated our laws. Well, look, those guys are scoped. And I say scoped. That means they're operating within the bounds of their jobs. Law enforcement, you can do things that are within the bounds of your job and you get immunity from being charged at a local level, because what will happen is, say you get charged, then the feds come in and adopt it and then dismiss charges. That's sort of the way that it works. And what actually were they doing? They're going to charge Greg Bovino because they said he was throwing some gas canisters into a crowd. I actually got it on video. Let's see what it is and see if maybe this is violative of any federal law, because that would be the only way that he'd actually get charged.
Gas is coming. Gas is coming. Second warning. We're filling you. Gas on bill, Bovino. Third warning. Gas on bill. All right. Gas. You just get back. Get back.
So a crowd dispersal technique, that's completely appropriate. He said, gas, third warning. He announced it. He let his people know. I think he did everything within policy, everything within the confines of the law. If you're using a less than lethal sort of crowd dispersal technique, a tool, he gave adequate warning. It was in an open area. I presume it was downwind. Greg Bovino knows what the heck he's doing. He's not going to be charged with a crime by the feds. I mean, Hennepin County can go after him all they want, but he's fully scoped, as were all of his guys there. And that was at a time when they were actually doing the enforcement. But shortly thereafter, we buckled. When I say we, the executive branch of this country, which is currently under the leadership of Donald Trump, who's mean, orange, and literally Hitler, and was elected by a mandate of the American people to do mass deportations, they buckled. They showed weakness. They removed Greg Bovino. They brought in Tom Homan to go do his mea culpa speech and end all the operations that were going on in Minneapolis, to pull back. Now, the Department of Homeland Security is bragging, we've removed several thousand illegal aliens from Minneapolis, so we don't need to be here anymore. There were 90,000 at last report, 90,000 illegal aliens in Minneapolis. You got what, 4% of them? 5% of them at most? There's 130,000 at last count illegal aliens in Minnesota. Now, I understand that other states are more populous. Other states are more conveniently located for illegal aliens to flee to, like Texas, California, shoot, even Florida. That doesn't negate the responsibility of the federal government to go out there and do mass deportations, not even because of the electorate sent them there to do it through a mandate in 2024, but because they swear an oath to a pesky, dusty document that has a very finite amount of responsibilities on there. And regardless of what your political affiliation is, you swear the oath. It's not an iPhone user agreement to uphold that pesky document. And part of that pesky document says border sovereignty. And then the downstream laws that have been passed, because when a bill becomes a bill up on Capitol Hill, the co-equal branches of government, individuals who were elected by the people to both houses of Congress, the House and the Senate. I mean, we got to go back over it, right? We're doing a civics lesson like we did a Teddy Roosevelt lesson to start with. They passed a law a law that funds ICE and Customs and Border Protection, and also other laws that says, go forth and eject these illegal aliens from our country. They're completely comporting with the law and our Constitution. There's no risk at all. And yet, because we're distracted and we're trying to flex and show how strong we really are because of the failures that have happened on the mass deportation front, we're losing focus. This is an unhealthy diversion that we have going on in the Middle East. And I haven't even weighed on the merits of it, what the consequences could be, what the upsides are, what the downsides are. Where is the foreign policy on it? It's not my lane. I'm out of my depth. I'm not going to pretend to understand it. I mean, maybe I'll get somebody to be a guest on the AMRAD pod in order to illuminate us and educate us on what the decisions that were part of it. My contention is, and I think on pretty firm ground, the president of the United States was fed a bunch of bull that they tried to assassinate you as part of one of the motivating factors behind him going to war in Iran. And for better or for worse, we are now distracted from what will actually improve the quality of life of the American citizens, bring down costs, free up some housing, allow job opportunities for American citizens. You know, like the America First sort of stuff, the things that we were assured that were coming. We're now distracted from doing that. And a war in a place that most Americans couldn't find on a map does not play in Peoria. Nowhere close to mass deportations would have. And because you punked out, you're not going to be able to reclaim any sort of tough guy image, Teddy Roosevelt style, by going to war with Iran. In fact, you're probably better off just doing some whitewater rafting. People would believe that you were tough then. All right. So that's going to wrap us up for today on the American Radicals podcast. I do have a nice palate cleanse. You know, I started off with the Teddy Roosevelt going on an expedition down in South America. I have sort of an adjacent piece. This is a kid who found a lost city just by using satellite images. Pretty cool.
It started as a science project.
That's my first discovery with the Mayan civilization. You can see here the 22 constellations.
By superimposing those constellations onto maps of Mayan cities, Gadouri made a correlation and came up with a theory.
I found that the Maya put our city at different places to imitate the form of the constellation.
Each star matched a city, but one constellation was incomplete. It had a star, but the city was missing. Gadouri set out to find it. After school and on the weekends, he pored over satellite images looking for signs of that lost city.
It's the area that he thought that there could be a possibility for him to find a lost city.
He brought his theory to the Canadian Space Agency, and it captured more satellite images just for him.
We really were able to locate some features on those satellite imagery.
Shapes detected in the tree cover hinted at the remnants of something human-made, possibly a pyramid.
Discovery Channel, jusqu'à 11h40.
Mais bravo! At school today, he spent more time in media interviews than in class.
Another constellation.
The next step is to travel to the Mexican jungle to confirm his city is really there, a dream Gadouri hopes one day to realize.
Pretty cool. All right, guys, we'll plan to be back with you tomorrow, noontime Eastern, as always, here on rumble.com/amradpod, YouTube at amradpod. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.